Moving to the most populous province in Canada. It can be heaven or it can be hell, depending on which city you choose. Do you want the warmest weather? Well, Windsor, Ontario is the spot. Are you looking for entertainment and nightlife? Well, Toronto is unrivaled. What about a government job and a rich history? Ottawa would be your choice. What about something that's well balanced, a strong job market, and the tech capital of Canada? Well, Kitchener-Waterloo is definitely worth consideration. I've lived here my entire life in Ontario for over 30 years, and today I'm going to be breaking down everything you need to know before making the move to Ontario. Let's dive right in. Now, I've segmented this video into 8 different sections geographically. We'll look at the first one here. We're going to start in Northern Ontario. Now, Northern Ontario is very sparsely populated. The reason being is it's over 800,000 kilometers squared. That's enough to fit a multitude of different European countries. For example, just to give you an illustration of how large, in fact, this area is, you can fit Germany, Portugal, the Netherlands, Belgium, Switzerland, the Czech Republic, Slovenia, and Luxembourg inside this northern area. Now, being in Northern Ontario, of course, we're gonna have to talk about the weather, and the weather here is absolutely brutal. Let's look at the largest city within Northern Ontario. That's going to be Sudbury. Now, Sudbury averages about 100 inches of snow every year. In January, if we look at the average temperatures, we're looking at a high of -5 and a low of -14. So definitely very cold, especially compared to here in Southern Ontario. The local economy there consists of mostly forestry, tourism, and mining. Things to do? Well, there's definitely plenty of things to do, especially in Northern Ontario when it comes to nature and wildlife and enjoying the great outdoors, especially in the summertime. We're talking about a multitude of lakes. The highest density of lakes possibly within the entire world is within Ontario, specifically within Northern Ontario. You have the places like the Muskokas, which is a very popular spot for retirees, as well as people looking to exit from the Greater Toronto area and find a more laid-back lifestyle. Definitely Northern Ontario might be a good choice. In terms of real estate, this is where there's definitely an advantage to living in this area. If we look at the December stats for Sudbury, Ontario, the average price for the average home in Sudbury, Ontario, sold just around $441,000. That's nearly half the average price in Ontario, which at the recording of this video is around $834,000. For the remainder of this video, I'll be using January 2025 statistics. I'm recording this in the month of March, but for the sake of this video, a lot of real estate boards have not published their data in terms of February stats, so we'll be looking at the January stats. Now let's head east to the nation's capital. We're gonna look at the following areas here: Carleton, Dundas, Glengarry, Glenville, Lanark, Leeds, Prescott, Russell, and Stormont. And the major population centers within this area: Ottawa, definitely the largest and the nation's capital, Hawkesbury, Cornwall, and Broxville. Now, when it comes to wintry weather, it's going to be a little bit warmer than, of course, in Sudbury, but it's still going to be fairly harsh. I did spend a New Year's Eve a few years back now in Ottawa, Ontario, and I was shocked how cold it was coming up from Kitchener, Ontario, where I am a local, and it was fairly cold and windy. In terms of the January temperatures, we're looking at -5 as a high and -14 as the low. Most of this area west of here, including the Northern Ontario, is going to be the Canadian Shield. Ottawa itself not really covered by the Canadian Shield, but it's an absolutely massive area. In terms of snow, Ottawa receives quite a bit of snow. We're talking 70 inches on average per year of snow. Ottawa, of course, is the nation's capital, so being both bilingual in English and French will definitely help you if you're looking for a government sector job. The city runs off the government, of course. It's a beautiful city. The Parliament Hill is absolutely gorgeous. A great incorporation of both British and French architecture of the time. Absolutely stunning building. You have Gatineau Park, which is just north in Quebec, and absolutely gorgeous provincial park there. So you have a lot of benefits of being in Ottawa. In terms of things to do, Gatineau, just like I mentioned, in terms of the winter time, gets so cold, in fact, that you can skate rather, down the Rideau Canal. It freezes over, especially in January and February. There's hundreds of people, possibly thousands of people skating on the Rideau Canal at any given time. Now, the summertime, the summers are actually quite pleasant in Ottawa. They're rather warm and humid, very similar to Montreal's weather. In terms of things to do in summer, you have whitewater rafting in the Ottawa River. And of course, you can explore places like Byward Market. Really cool, interesting area. They have an excellent bakery shop. The name, I forget at this point, but in time I'll do an overlay if I can find it. In terms of day trips, you have Thousand Islands and Gananoque. If you want to enjoy the beautiful scenery in that area. In terms of the average price, we're below the provincial average. The average home price in Ottawa, Ontario was $670,000 in January 2025. Now let's head over to the south. Now I'll overlay on the screen here exactly kind of what area what we're talking about. And the largest population center within this area is going to be Kingston, Ontario. Most of these cities within this video I have been to personally myself, so I do have a general idea of the vibe of the city, with the exception of Sudbury. I've never been to Sudbury, Ontario, but I have been to the Sault Ste. Marie. I have been into the Muskokas as well, but never to Sudbury itself. Now, looking at Kingston, Kingston is very European in terms of its architecture. I would describe it as very similar to Montreal in terms of the general architecture and the vibe of the city on a much more smaller scale, of course. You do have the incorporation of one of the Great Lakes right on the water there. You have the fort, which is there as well. Also, another benefit there is within this area, you have Prince Edward County, which is going to be southwest of Kingston, Ontario. And this area is absolutely gorgeous. There's a ton of wineries in this area. And in my opinion, the most beautiful beach in Ontario, Canada is going to be Sandbanks Provincial Park. Very secluded. I believe it's the second longest freshwater beach in the world, only second to Wasaga, which is on the southwestern side of Ontario. Again, things to do in this area, the provincial park. You have Gananoque, you have the Thousand Islands, and it's a great place, especially in the summertime. In terms of the average sale price within Kingston, Ontario, in the month of January, we're looking at an average price of $615,000. Now we're looking at the south central area of Ontario. This is going to be characterized by the Greater Toronto area. I've excluded Toronto proper. That will be in the next section. So this can vary quite drastically in terms of pricing, in terms of vibes, in terms of demographics. In the eastern side, we're talking about, Oshawa, Ontario. There's quite a few jokes about Oshawa and how unpleasant it is living there, higher crime rates and what have you. In terms of the other areas, we're looking at Brampton, Markham, Oakville, Burlington, Mississauga, Barrie. This area varies drastically. If we look at snow, for example, the average in Barrie, Ontario, which is on the northern side of the GTA, I would characterize it just outside of the Greater Toronto area, they receive about 88 inches of snow each and every year. And if we look on the warmer side, southwest of Toronto, we're looking at Mississauga. They receive about 44 inches, so half the amount of snow, and you're still about an hour and a half from each other. The GTA is very diverse, it's very fast-paced, and it's the economic hub of Canada. My personal favorite spots within the Greater Toronto area is going to be basically along Lakeshore Boulevard. We're talking Port Credit, Oakville, and Burlington. Absolutely beautiful. I think those three cities really did a great job of incorporating the Great Lakes, and there's a lot of wealth in these areas, especially in Burlington, Oakville, and Port Credit. If money was no object, I'd probably live there in the Port Credit area. Really, really nice, or in Oakville. In terms of things to do, there is a plethora of things to do. Just to name a few of them, we have Canada's Wonderland. That's going to be in Vaughan, Ontario. We have multiple art museums, multiple parks, the Great Lakes. We have beaches. We have skiing at Snow Valley in Barrie. And then you can hike the Bruce Trail. There's a multitude of things to do. In terms of the average sale price, I took Mississauga, Ontario for this example. And in January, the average price was just around $1,050,000 for the average home. Not detached, the average property price. Now let's go to the most multicultural city in the world. That's the city of Toronto. Yes. It's the largest city within Canada, the economic hub of Canada, the most culturally diverse place in Canada. In terms of snowfall, quite nice. About 48 inches of snowfall each and every year. And snow really doesn't stick a long time on the ground. In Toronto, it's usually gone by the end of the week. It doesn't really stick for that long, especially compared to places like London or Northern Ontario, where the snow does stick around. In terms of the average highs, we're looking at Toronto, we're looking at a -1 in January and a -8 as a low. The key industries, well, Toronto has it all: business, finance, tech, film, TV. And that's very interesting. In fact, if you're watching a lot of series on Netflix, a lot of movies, they do film quite a bit in the greater Toronto area and Toronto proper. It's quite interesting. If you do have a keen eye, you can figure out exactly where they have been filming. Things to do: we have the CN Tower, Ripley's Aquarium, the ROM, Kensington Market, really cool, the Distillery District, and then festivals. There's a plethora of festivals: Caravana, TIFF, and the list goes on. Toronto has absolutely everything within one city. It's basically all of the best parts of the world all in one area. And there's really no other city in the world quite like Toronto. Maybe New York, you could argue, does have that similar vibe, but Toronto does have something very unique that frankly most cities in the world pale in comparison to when it comes to, well, you can get any food you'd like. You can get Chinese, you can get Japanese, you can get Jamaican, you can get French. It's all within that city. In terms of the average price, we're looking at $1.1 million for the month of January. Now let's look at Central West. And this area, we're talking about Kitchener-Waterloo, Cambridge, Guelph, and then north and northwest towards Sauble. Now Kitchener is where I was born. It's where I currently live. Lived here my entire life. I'm a real estate agent here in the area. If you're looking to make a move here to Kitchener, Waterloo, Cambridge, or the surrounding areas, I would be more than happy to help you. You can book a call with me in the first link in the description, or call, text, or email. If you're looking for a real estate agent outside of this area, I do have a lot of agents that I can refer you to that I know on a personal basis that I like and trust. In terms of the snowfall, we do have more snowfall than the greater Toronto area does. Kitchener receives about 63 inches of snow every year. The high in January is -3, the low is -10. Now Kitchener-Waterloo, living here, I can tell you it's a cut above most cities within Ontario. We have a great balance of a strong job market, high incomes, low crime rates. We had the lowest homicide rate in 2022 in all of Canada. In terms of the average residential price, we're going to be far lower than the greater Toronto area. The average price in January in the city of Kitchener was right around $738,000. In terms of things to do, St. Jacobs Farmers Market, which is just north of Waterloo, Ontario, has the largest outdoor farmers market in Canada. In terms of arts and culture, the Stratford Music Festival draws in about 1 million people each and every year. It's a beautiful city, just about half an hour from Kitchener. Moving on east, we're going to look at the Niagara Peninsula, and this is going to include pretty much everything starting in Hamilton and east towards Niagara Falls. So Hamilton, Niagara Falls, St. Catharines, Welland. Hamilton itself, pretty cool city. There is a little bit more crime in Hamilton, especially in the downtown core. But of course, once you get out of the city center, it's a really nice city. It's the waterfall capital over the world. It has over 100 waterfalls. That's something definitely to look at if you are there. In terms of the most famous waterfall in the world, you're going to be looking at Niagara Falls on, of course, the eastern side of the Niagara Peninsula. In terms of the climate, Hamilton receives 46 inches of snow, so a little bit less than Kitchener, even less than there is in Toronto. St. Catharines, a really cool city. It's going to be one of the warmest cities in Ontario, other than Windsor. St. Catharines is going to be quite warm. There's a lot of wineries as well between St. Catharines and the Niagara Falls area. Really cool. Niagara-on-the-Lake, absolutely beautiful town, pretty much a hallmark town. I mean, it doesn't really get better than that, and that's going to be just north of Niagara Falls. Of course, things to do: Niagara Falls, the boat tours, the casinos, hiking, wineries. You've got it all pretty much in this area, and the weather is going to be fairly warm compared to the rest of Ontario. The average sale price in Hamilton was $757,000 in January. Niagara Falls is a bit cheaper. We're talking $653,000. Now heading southwest, we're going to be looking at the London, Sarnia, Windsor area, pretty much that area in there, as well as Chatham. This is going to be the warmest area in Ontario, and I'd argue the warmest area in Canada, other than maybe Victoria, BC. But then of course you do not get the warm summers like you do here in southwestern Ontario. Windsor barely gets any snow, and if it does, it's pretty much melted away the next day. And the summers in Windsor are quite hot. We're talking like 27, 28 degrees, and it's a humid weather. So it's really warm. Even compared to Kitchener here where I live, there's probably 3-degree difference in the summertime, maybe 4 on any given day. And it really does make a difference in terms of you do get a little bit more enjoyment. You can enjoy your pool longer if you do have a pool in Windsor, Ontario. And the benefits of living in Windsor, Ontario is you are right across from Detroit, so you can enjoy a multitude of sports there. You got the Detroit Lions, you have the Detroit Red Wings, the Detroit Pistons, and it's fairly cheap, especially compared to the Toronto Maple Leafs, which frankly can cost a fortune. Things to do in Windsor, well, again, casinos, Caesars Windsor Casino, you have Covenant Garden, you have a lot of great areas for the beach. In general, if you're in London, Ontario, dubbed the Forest City for the amount of green space that they have and the amount of forestry that they have in the actual city itself. Cool city. I'd stay away from the eastern part of the city, east of Adelaide. The western side, quite nice in places like Byron, Ontario. And in terms of London, they have excellent beaches within an hour, either north or south. South, you're looking at Port Stanley. In the north, you're looking at arguably the second best or third best beach in Ontario. That's going to be Grand Bend. And in terms of the average residential price in January in Windsor was $559,000, and in London it was $640,000. I hope you enjoyed this video, and if you did, you might like this video coming up next.